Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started. Just want to welcome you all this evening and great to see you in person. Thanks for coming out. Just a couple things from the History Center. We have some programs coming up on April 4th as the date that our seasonal sites open. So when you come, we have tours of the colonial buildings and the fire museum. They are closed over the winter. April 11th, we have a fundraiser called A Date with History. It's going to be really great. I think it's actually sold out, but we do have a waiting list. Auction fundraising dinner. On April 12th, our Genealogy Society program is Prospect Hill Cemetery, the Revolutionary War veterans. And then April 17th, we have our Spirits of the Past, our mixology program, which is very popular. That's all I have for now. If you'd like any more information, please visit yorkhistorycenter.org. Thanks.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Scott Rosenau. I'm one of the assistant program directors here for the Civil War Roundtable. Just want to welcome everyone here tonight. Have a nice big crowd tonight. Thankful for that. And just again, Roundtable would like to thank the History Center for all their support, hosting our events, broadcasting them through Zoom for all those who can't be here in person. So we do want to thank them for their support as well. Looking forward to the year ahead. We do have a great slate of speakers lined up for the first half of the year, and we're finalizing the second half of the year, which would be September through November. We're going to looking forward to next month. We have Pete Mealy coming to speak. He's the senior project leader at the Susquehanna National Heritage Area in Wrightsville, where they're working with the Mifflin House, restoring that, which played a role in the Underground Railroad and the Battle of Wrightsville. So he's going to be speaking next month about the Mifflin Farm. His program is called The Mifflin Farm, Place of Courage, Conflict, and Conscience. On a knoll overlooking the Susquehanna River in Wrightsville, Quakers Jonathan and Susanna Wright Mifflin built their home at the dawn of the 19th century, and the home quickly took center stage in the regional conflict over slavery. Courageous freedom seekers escaping the brutality of bondage found refuge in the walls of the Mifflin home for more than 30 years. In the summer of 1863, the Civil War came to Wrightsville as thousands of Confederates attempted to cross the Columbia-Wrightsville Bridge, which Scott Mingus knows quite a bit about. And they were stopped by courageous local militiamen on the Mifflin Farm. 155 years later, conflict returned to the farm when the property was threatened by demolition. Community rallied, saved the treasure, soon to be the Susquehanna Discovery Center and Heritage Park. A world-class visitor destination celebrating the nationally important stories of York and Lancaster counties. And Peter is the, as I said, the senior project leader at the Heritage Area in Wrightsville. He's also an adjunct professor at York College. Previously, he served as the president and executive director at the Seminary Ridge Museum in Gettysburg. And he is currently working on his PhD in American Studies from Penn State Harrisburg, where he is currently working on a dissertation about Gettysburg's Eternal Light Peace Memorial, History, Memory, and Myth. So definitely look forward to his program next month. Tonight, we're going to welcome Scott Mingus, who needs very little introduction to our group. He's spoken many times to our group, great presentations as always. So we're definitely looking forward to his presentation tonight about the Irish at Fredericksburg, which is very timely since yesterday was St. Patrick's Day. Scott Mingus is a retired scientist, an executive in global paper industry. He's originally from Ohio, graduated from Miami University of Ohio. He was part of the research team that developed the self-adhesive postage stamp, which I think many of us are thankful for, that we don't have to lick the stamp anymore. And in his spare time, he's written more than 35 Civil War and Underground Railroad books. And numerous articles for the Gettysburg Magazine. He's achieved Lifetime Achievement Awards from the York County History Center here, Northeastern County Historical and Preservation Society, Camp Curtin Historical Society, for his many contributions to Civil War history. He's written award-winning books, a biography of William Extra Billy Smith, and with co-author Eric Wittenberg, they wrote the 2023 Bachelder Coddington Award winner for the Gettysburg campaign called If We're Striking for Pennsylvania. That was for a volume 1 of a 2-volume series, and I recommend both of them. Great books. So without further ado, let's welcome Scott as he tells us about the Irish at Fredericksburg.
Come back with me to 1862. We live near Gettysburg, right? Our focus a lot in this area is 1863. When the Confederates came to York, they went to Wrightsville, as Scott mentioned. And then, of course, we had the big Battle of Gettysburg. But there was a lot of fighting, as we all know, in 1862, in 1864, 1861, 1865. Tonight, though, I want to talk about probably one of the most famous single attacks in Civil War history. And that is the attack of the Irish Brigade in Fredericksburg. But before we do that, let's take a quick look at why the Irish Brigade became the Irish Brigade. If you go back to 1845 through 1851, there were a lot of problems in Ireland, a lot of issues. One of the issues is the Great Potato Famine. People don't have enough food. The British government doesn't give them enough food. There's all kinds of controversy. And eventually the Irish rebel against Great Britain. Many Irish, including my wife's family members, her great-great-grandfather left County Galway, moved to Zanesville, Ohio. So they are one of about 2 million people that left Ireland during that period of time. In fact, at one point, the number 2 speaking Gaelic city in the world was Boston, Massachusetts. As more and more people had left from Great Britain and Ireland and left to come here. So with the failed rebellion, a number of Irish continued to leave the country. You know, some were hunted by the British government, others needed food, they wanted a fresh start, and so people started moving in droves to the United States. By 1860, 25% of the population of Boston is Irish, first or second generation. 24% of the population of New York City, 24 or 25% of the population of Brooklyn, 25% of the population of New Orleans is Irish, first or second generation. In fact, I'm from Southern Ohio. Cincinnati, a town we associate with Germans. 17% of the population of Cincinnati was born in Ireland at the time of the Civil War. So you've got a lot of Irish immigrants running around the United States, of course, and they're going to be forming early in the war into various regiments. By the end of 1861, there are a number of Irish regiments in the field. Most of them, in our popular mind, every Irish regiment was part of the Irish Brigade. No, they weren't. There was only a handful that actually made up the actual Irish Brigade. And one of them wasn't even Irish at the start of the war. And one of their replacement regiment was only half Irish. But we're going to talk about that as we go forward. This guy, Tom Marr, is the person that is directly responsible for the creation of what we know today as the famed Irish Brigade of the Civil War. Now, this guy, as mentioned, was one of the people who was rebelling against Ireland against Great Britain during the Irish Rebellion. He's actually, believe it or not, captured. He's sentenced to death, but the Crown commutes the sentence. He ends up in Australia, which then was a penal colony, and he ends up hopping on a boat to New York City. Ends up in America as an escaped convict, and very quickly established himself as the leader of the Irish community in New York City. He publishes a newspaper, he's a journalist, he's an attorney, he becomes quite popular. He helps raise the 69th New York State Militia, and then when the war begins, his friend Abraham Lincoln, who needs the support of the Democrat Irish, starts naming some of the Democrat Irish leaders, such as Thomas More, as brigadier generals or as colonels to get some of the support from the Irish. So we're going to look at the Irish Brigade at Fredericksburg. At the time of the battle, we've got about 1,250 men comprising the what's popularly known as the Irish Brigade. By that point, it's 5 regiments. The original regiments wanted to switch out for the 116th Pennsylvania had been added. So we're going to talk about the 28th Massachusetts, the 63rd New York, the 69th New York, 88th New York, and the 116th Pennsylvania. At Fredericksburg, they're part of the 2nd Corps, commanded by a Pennsylvanian by the name of Winfield Scott Hancock, somebody we all know from the Battle of Gettysburg. Now, the 63rd New York, one of the original regiments of the Irish Brigade, had been raised in New York City in the autumn of 1861. Most of the recruits were given a signing bonus that ranged from $120 to $140, sometimes a little bit higher. But they spent most of the early part of the Civil War helping to defend Washington. They're not doing much, just kind of sitting around. And then eventually they are going to be part of the first iteration of the Irish Brigade. They are shot to pieces at the Battle of Antietam, and so they need to recover. Their flag gets tattered and torn. They will take their famous green flag. They will ship it back, as well as 2 other New York regiments. They're going to ship their green banners all the way back to Tiffany's in New York City for repairs to the silk. And as such, they do not have their green flags in the fall of 1862. 69th New York, of course, is the regiment that Tom Moore had originally been associated with. The 69th, he had been originally a captain in the state militia. Then when they became a Civil War regiment, he became the colonel, was now the brigadier general. They had lost a number of men at Bull Run, where again, they're not part of the Irish Brigade, but they're fighting. Again, you can see this original recruiting poster appealing to the Irish of New York City to join the Union war effort. And contrary to popular belief, they're not pulling them off the docks and off the ships. Most of these people had already been established and they were already in New York City at that point. And the final regiment I want to talk about tonight is 88. Now, they were mustered in Fort Schuyler. They were not an original regiment. They were the combination of the early war, 2nd, 4th New York, that were 3-month, 90-day regiments, if you will, that had been re-enlisted in the Army at that point. So as the 2nd and 4th combine, they have a chance. They can either accept the number that New York's going to assign to them, but they hold out and say, we want to be the 88th. Now, New York wasn't anywhere close to having 88 regiments at that point in the Civil War, but they insisted that we be the 88th New York, because a lot of these guys were interested in the Conneaut Rangers, which had been an Irish unit, all Irish unit in the British Army. Now, I always find this ironic. You got an Irish unit in the British Army, which eventually led to a rebellion between the 2 countries, but they want to at least honor the soldiers in the British Army. These guys joined the Irish Brigade. They were the last New York regiment to join. They're commanded by the fellow on the right, Patrick Kelly. Anybody here know Patrick Kelly, what happens to him at Gettysburg? He gets shot at Gettysburg. And that would be the last time we see Patrick Kelly of any substance for most of the war. But Kelly in 1862 is the command. He commands the Irish Brigade at Gettysburg. Here he commands the 88th. The 28th Massachusetts is raised in Boston, as mentioned, a town filled with immigrants. Their motto is the famed Fa Ba Law that we associate with the entire Irish Brigade, recognizing that originally it's only the Massachusetts boys that use that motto. Eventually, the Fa Ba Law will be adopted by the entire Irish Brigade. They served in South Carolina and Georgia before they are assigned to the Army of the Potomac. They're going to replace a non-Irish regiment. I mentioned earlier that the original Irish Brigade had a totally non-Irish regiment, the 29th Massachusetts. They were put in because the 28th and the 29th, they put them in together, and they leave. The significance of the 28th, And people don't often recognize this. You see all these famous paintings of the Irish Brigade with the green flags. No, one green flag at Fredericksburg, just one. There are not 5 flags. I mean, I've seen so many paintings to show every single regiment of the Irish Brigade with a green flag. No, one regiment, one green flag only, and that's the flag of the 28th Massachusetts. The newcomers to the Irish Brigade, the last people to join them, are the 116th Pennsylvania. They include men raised in a place you might know, York County, Pennsylvania. Irish men from York, Irish men from Lancaster, a lot of Irish from Chester and Montgomery, and of course a ton from Philadelphia sign up for what becomes the 116th Pennsylvania Infantry. They got a real problem. The fact that they were added to the brigade after Antietam. Remember, we're going to talk about Fredericksburg. What battles are there in between Antietam and Fredericksburg? Not much. So these guys are pretty green. The Irish Brigade doesn't know who these guys are. They don't necessarily trust them. Half of the regiment's German. So you kind of took, some Irish and some German, kind of mixed them up and put them together. But the Irish Brigade, much like the Iron Brigade at Gettysburg, wasn't yet that familiar with the 24th Michigan. Here we have the Irish Brigade not familiar with the 116th Pennsylvania. Keep in mind, they've always been Massachusetts and New York boys. Now we got Pennsylvanians joining in. So the Fredericksburg campaign begins when the United States Army decides we are going to try to dislodge Robert E. Lee's Confederate Army in Northern Virginia from in and around Fredericksburg. After the Battle of Antietam, both armies, late October, early November, had finally started moving out of Maryland and had started returning to Virginia. So you can see this map by my good friend Hal Jesperson, map maker extraordinaire from California, showing the movements of the respective armies coming down from Maryland, heading back into Virginia, and getting ready to go to Fredericksburg. The commander of the Union Army, Ambrose Burnside, decides that we want to dislodge Lee and take Lee out. So many of Burnside's men lose their lives or are seriously wounded trying to construct pontoon bridges over the Rappahannock River. The river's running deep, it's running cold. You're not going to swim across the river that easily. And under Confederate fire, often intense Confederate fire, they're going to put up these pontoon bridges in the second week of December. So the middle bridge there is where the Irish Brigade is going to start marching across. They are not in the first wave of the attack on the Confederates. Now the Confederates are entrenched in a long battle line stretching from north to south, north of Fredericksburg, all the way down here to Hamilton's Crossing, which our friend down here, Jim Worley, who many Yorkers know, perhaps not fondly, but Jim Worley's men are down there early on. A lot of Jackson's boys there as well. But you see this long Confederate line, and the Yankees are going to cross the river. Pontoon bridges in Fredericksburg here, more pontoon bridges down here. And of course, down here, they're actually just going to come across in boats, relatively unexposed. But this is a very long, major battle line. And Burnside's idea is that I should be able to easily dislodge that entire battle line. The problem is he doesn't coordinate his attacks real well. Now, his original battle plan was to soften up the defenses pretty heavily with the artillery bombardments with long-range 20 and 24-pound Parrott rifles. That doesn't really work as well as he thinks it's going to work. But then he's going to send his men across, either on pontoon bridges or again on scows or barges or other boats. Now, the first people to attack the northern part of the line, we go back here for a minute. Whoops. Let's go here. Most of the original action is going to take place right in and around Fredericksburg itself. Just on the south side of Fredericksburg, you're going to get a number of attacks by Jarius Couch. Now, my wife is a member of the Couch family. Her great grand uncle is Darius Couch, the commander of the Union Second Corps at the Battle of Fredericksburg. Darius Couch's men come across, they are going to get slaughtered. Because the ground coming out of Fredericksburg is very open, it's very flat in most cases, and the Confederates have the high ground. And so it's fairly easy to shoot down the Yankees as they come in with multiple attacks, most of which fail miserably in the day. You can see as these guys are attacking, you have more troops. Here's Sykes' 5th Corps. Here's Bull Sumner's men, Andrew Humphreys, another name from Gettysburg. People rolling across the river trying to get across as these attacks fail. While that's going on, the Confederates are shooting up Fredericksburg. Anybody trying to get across through the streets of Fredericksburg, the Confederates have put artillery, they put sharpshooters, they've got infantry regiments, so that every cross street in Fredericksburg, as the Union troops advance across those cross streets, are getting shot to pieces long before they even make it to the battlefield. And so the town itself becomes a killing zone. And there are a lot of soldiers being gunned down in the streets of Fredericksburg. So multiple Union attacks. The main Confederate line is back here on this ridgeline known as Mary's Heights. But look how open the ground is today. It is impossible to replicate this photograph today because you're standing and I'm taking a picture on the side of a house. And beyond that are dozens of other houses. This entire part of the Fredericksburg battlefield has been lost to history. So you really can't interpret the Battle of Fredericksburg that well by walking the route of the Irish Brigade. I've walked it a few times, but it's tough to really see because you're walking through city streets by and large. Only when you have these old photographs that show how open that ground really was. So again, Confederates back up here. Most of the Union attacks are going to follow this road. They're going to disperse along through here and are going to try to climb those heights under fire. Now, the Irish Brigade is crossed on the pontoon bridge. As mentioned, there's only one flag. That's the 28th Massachusetts. So the New York boys spot a whole bunch of boxwood growing wild next to the city dock. If you've ever been to Fredericksburg, the city dock was one of the busiest places on the Rappahannock River in the days before the Civil War. It was a major trading point going all the way back to John Smith and some of the early white pioneers that had come into the region on the Rappahannock River. These boxwood were growing wild there, and so the orderlies of the 88th New York and the 63rd New York and 69th New York start harvesting the boxwood. They don't have green flags. Well, these New Yorkers, to show themselves as Irishmen, put a sprig of boxwood, a sprig about yay long or so, cut. Sometimes some of them may have had a little bit longer, but they're going to put them in their cappies, so their forage hats, as a representation that we are Irish. We are Irishmen. We don't have a flag to follow here, just the U.S. flag, but we are going to at least have this element of Ireland with us. Now, as they're standing there on the dock, by the way, there's a lot of warehouses. They're perfectly sheltered. There's no fire coming in at them. But their chaplain of the 69th New York, a Catholic priest by the name of Thomas O'Lett, he is not Irish, folks. He is French-Canadian. He's not even American. He's a French-Canadian guy. He's a Jesuit priest, and he's been in New York City as a professor at Fordham University. When the war breaks out, he enrolls as the chaplain of the 69th New York. And eventually he'll become the chaplain of the Irish Brigade itself. So the colonel of the 69th, Robert Nugent, hands him a sprig of boxwood and famously says, "I'll make an Irishman out of the father this day." And the priest wears it, sticks the boxwood in his, what do they call it, miter caps, or whatever his attire was called. So now the Irish Brigade is going to very quietly start moving to the north. Again, they've come over the middle pontoon bridge. This is the city wharves right here. The boxwood were all growing right along the bank here. So every street, north-south street, is a killing zone. as Confederate cross artillery keeps zeroing in on that. So you gotta pause, dash across the opening, pause again, dash across the opening. I mean, it takes a long time. For the Irish Brigade to make their northern movement, they have to also reform their ranks because it's broken as they go across there. While they're doing this, hundreds and hundreds of Union wounded soldiers are coming to the rear. Some on stretchers, some limping badly, some running, some cursing, some screaming, some in agony. In fact, at one point, a wounded United States soldier is being carried to the rear in a wheelbarrow from one of the farms on the west side of Fredericksburg. His leg is dangling. It's been badly injured. The man's in a hideous pain. He spots a big burly Irish sergeant and says, "Take my knife and cut off my leg." That's how much pain this guy's in. And of course, the Irishman, I'm like, okay, maybe he gives him a shot of whiskey. I don't know. The legend's kind of mixed on that. But he ends up cutting the guy's leg off, slices right through the tendon, throws the leg aside, and on goes the soldier back to the rear. We don't know his name. We don't know if he lived or not. But the Irish Brigade would talk about that incident in numerous letters, diary entries, post-war memoirs, etc. Another case, another guy comes by in a wheelbarrow. It's a German officer. He speaks only German. So fairly quickly, thank goodness, the Philadelphians have got Germans in there because the Irish can't talk to this guy. But one of the Philadelphia boys, who happens to be German, is able to, in fact, interview this German officer and talk to him about what's going on. While they're there, now, anybody here Irish? Raise your hands. Some of you, yeah, of course. Some of you are Irish. My wife's Irish. And I'm told, this is beyond the superstitions or the legends of the Irish being drunk and brawlers, etc., that the one thing that is true is the Irish tend to be superstitious, particularly back in that day. My wife's family certainly is superstitious. They still are, always were. But they have this superstition. And they hear one sound. The artillery fire stopped. The battlefield goes stone quiet. And all they hear is a cat crying. A black cat crying. Not good, right? If you're superstitious. I mean, the cat is crying. It's not squealing with delight because it's happy to see we Irishmen. No. It is having a majorly problem. So finally, they're going to make it all the way up here. Briefly pause between a Union artillery regiment or a battery, and then they're going to make the left turn onto George Street. As so many other Union troops had did already this fateful day, they make the left turn onto George Street. And they start heading out of Fredericksburg into that open prairie between Fredericksburg City and Mary's Heights. The ground is littered with dead bodies, with wounded men, with parts of men. It's an ugly, ugly scene as they make that left turn under fire and start heading up. As they start moving closer and closer to the west edge of town, they enter the black section of Fredericksburg. It's called Freetown because they were free blacks that lived there. This was not an enslaved community. This was a community of people who had been manumitted or had been born into freedom or had purchased their freedom. But the Irish Brigade are going to halt in the middle of the black section of town. There's where they start taking their first significant casualties as incoming Confederate artillery starts blowing holes in some of the ranks at that point. They're about 900 yards away at that point from their destination. So after they pause, Brigadier General Marr, starts moving them up and over the hill. That hill is where the Confederate artillery has been zeroing in. So as the Irishmen race up over the hill, the Confederates are trying to pick them off as they come across. That's now, again, if you're ever in Fredericksburg, you can go up the hill. It's Kenmore Avenue. The cross street, George and Kenmore, is the hill on which the Irish Brigade start taking the hits. Now, they've got this mill race. It's very deep. It's probably as deep as this. You don't just casually walk across the mill race. You gotta go down and back up. And so it takes a while for these men to cross. And as you can see, of the New Yorkers, so at least 2 of the New York regiments and the 28th, are going to find a bridge that at least still has some of the superstructure left, and they're going to try to cross on that. The 63rd New York and our beloved friends from Philadelphia are going to hop down into the ditch, and then to their horror find out that you can't really get up on the other side as easily as you might think. And so they start forming a human chain to pull these guys up and out of the ditch. As they're doing all this, Mars running around, on foot, waving his sword, encouraging his men on. Now, just before the 116th, the Pennsylvanians go across, their Colonel Dennis Henan is wounded, and command goes to Lieutenant Colonel St. Clair Mulholland, a name again you Gettysburg buffs will recognize. I think he won a Medal of Honor, didn't he? Or received a Medal of Honor for Gettysburg. But St. Clair Mulholland is going to take over for the 116th. While that's going on, they get everybody across the mill race, and Marr raises his sword and puts them in this battle line. There's one thing painfully wrong with this picture. Painfully wrong. It shows Thomas Marr on a horse. He's not mounted at this stage, folks. He's on foot. He's not on his horse, because that's going to play a huge role. Because Marr, who believes in, he's a former officer of the British Army at one point, he is deciding that we don't want to, not an officer, he's formerly an officer of the Irish Army. He decides that, he's been hurt earlier, he has an ulcerated foot, it's really painful, so he decides, I'm going to go back across the mill race, and I'm going back into Fredericksburg to get my horse. He never comes back. For all our discussion of Thomas Marr of the Irish Brigade, forward. He's not there, folks. He leaves his men, goes back into town to get his horse. I don't know if he found his horse or not, because he does not come back to the front lines. He's not there at a point in time. His men will always resent Thomas Marr abandoning them at Fredericksburg. It's one of the many reasons that Marr eventually will not be a brigadier general in the Army of the Potomac anymore. But at least at this point, he is getting a lot of resentment. So the Irish continue to move forward, west on George Street, and opposite them are the Cobb's Brigade. This is Thomas Cobb from the Georgia State Archives painting. Many of his men are Irish from Savannah, who had come into the port of Savannah, and then migrated throughout Georgia. They've been reconstituted, but they start seeing the 28th Massachusetts flag, and then at a distance, when the guys get closer, they see this sea of blue and green with all that boxwood, and they realize that this is Thomas Marr's boys. And according to several Confederate accounts, they don't want to shoot initially. They're Irishmen, fellow Irish. Irishmen should be shooting Brits. They shouldn't be shooting each other. So the Georgians are going to pause, and Cobb's going to roar, basically expletive, fire at those expletive Yankees, give it to them, shoot them. And the Georgians are like, yeah, okay, fine. Now that's the flag that the 28th Georgia carries. It is not a green flag either. But look in the middle of the stars and bars is the Irish harp. So again, we've got an Irish flag of some sort at least flying, but it's not a green flag there. This is the Confederate line on Mary's Heights, taken on one of my many visits to Fredericksburg to plan this talk. Give you an idea of what that line would look like. This is what it famously would have looked like with Cobb's Irish boys and the other Georgian boys firing out of that as the Irish Brigade comes on. Now I like this picture because this artist clearly says 28th Massachusetts. He knows. One flag, 28th Massachusetts. There are other pictures I did not use because, again, I don't want to show 5 flags. It's only one. But here comes the 28th Massachusetts getting gunned down because the 28th is going to take the bulk of the early hits. Why? The Confederates are firing on the flag. And so the fire is concentrated on the 28th. Now, William Miller, the Washington Artillery, they are Confederate artillery units. On they came, talking about the Irish Brigade, in beautiful array, seemingly more determined to hold the plain before. Remember, this is flat ground, but they're coming across. But our fire was murderous, and no troops on earth could stand the feud and filth that we were giving them. In the foremost line, we distinguished the green flag, not flags, the green flag, singular, with the golden harp of old Ireland. We knew it to be Mars Irish Brigade. The gunners of the 2 rifle pieces, Corporal Payne and Hardy, were directed to turn their guns against this column. But the gallant enemy pushed on beyond all former charges and fought and left their dead within 5 and 20 paces of the sunken road. The Irish Brigade moves forward farther than anyone else had got at that particular point. This painting, National Park Service commissioned this. I think it's Sidney King was the artist. Shows again, there's the flat plain, there's the town of Fredericksburg. Irish had started here, went all the way down to George Street, came out George Street, formed into battle line, marched back in town, and there's the battle line of the Irish Brigade crossed here. And there's the Washington Artillery, the Georgians to their left, banging away at them as they come across. This picture is really hard to see. It's kind of dark. It's, again, one of the few photographs taken right after the battle that gives you an idea of, again, the terrain. This swale right here, not visible today because it's overgrown with the town. This swale's where the Irish Brigade halts. Most of the Irish Brigade halts. They're going to make multiple attempts to get across that swale and start going up towards the ridge line. Almost every one of these charges is going to fail rather miserably. But that swale offers a degree of protection. Irish will attack, fall back to the swale, rejoin their ranks, decide how many men we still have, close ranks, and move forward again. They're going to make multiple attacks coming out of that swale. Now, the attack's finally going to stall. I mentioned the Irish Brigade's going to go prone for the final time. This house, still there, 700 Little Page Street, is the only remaining house in that area that was there when the Irish Brigade were there. Everything else is a post-Civil War development. And so, again, this house gives you just a little tiny glimpse of what the Irish Brigade men would have seen as they are fighting in and around the area. And this area, just behind this house, Alan Stratton's house, would have been the county fairgrounds for the area. And so the Irish are going to, again, picture here, showing this is the house right here. It's the house, here's the fairgrounds back through here. And again, you can see the Irishmen. This is again George Street coming out of Fredericksburg. Here's the rebels firing away down here. Again, other photo drawings done of the Irish Brigade's attack, just showing again how deadly that field would have been, littered with Irish corpses. James Cavanaugh, an officer from Tipperary, rallies the 69th New York. They are about the only Irish regiment still with enough manpower to do anything. Everyone else is cowering in the swale. They're dead, they're dying, they're wounded, they can't go forward, they're tired, they're exhausted. He grabs as many of the boys from the 69th as he can and says, "Blaze away, boys, and stand it. Don't cower. Don't shirk. Stand it. Stand it. They're firing at you, you're dying, but stand it. Just keep at it." His men finally stand up, and here comes what's left of the 69th New York. These guys will get, again, closer than almost anyone else gets. They'll get within 50 yards of the stone wall before one final volley from the Georgia boys gunned them down. Cavanaugh himself is shot in the hip. Now, William Terrell, who is shot, he's another guy shot in the legs, can't stand up. He's still got the flag, the United States flag, because again, this regiment does not have their Irish flag. So he's dead. He's gone. The flag's not there. The regiment retreats. Battle will eventually start winding down. Men are crouching behind the houses. So again, if you go down to Fredericksburg, you'll see many of the houses right by within the 50 to 75 yards of the stone wall. There's 2 or 3 small houses that the National Park Service owns as part of Fredericksburg National Battlefield. But the survivors of the 69th New York are hiding in and around those few houses, trying desperately to get as much cover as they can. The Ennis house as well. Again, you can see the bullet marks in this old picture. Most of those fired directed at the Union troops that are cowering inside. Now, William McCarter of the 116th, he's from Philadelphia, Irish immigrant, says our shattered and bleeding ranks held their ground, determined to fight to the last. Irish blood was up. The legends, again, my family, my wife's family, the Irish like to brawl, at least according to my wife's family folks. Some of them did, but he talks about this fact that Irish blood's up. We're getting pounded, but we're not going to take it. When the final attack petered out and the remaining colonels still left, again, Marr's not there, so the colonels finally call a halt to it. I like McCarter's comment. The rebels on Mary's Heights, overcome by the bravery of the Irish foe, clapped and cheered. Now, Bill, I studied the Civil War for most of my life. I do not recall a single other time in the Civil War that the Confederates stand and give a standing ovation to their opponents. I can't think of anything else.
But they do show that in the movie Gods and
They
Generals.
do show it in Gods and Generals, absolutely. McCarter and other Irish accounts say that they stood and they clapped for the Irish Brigade. The men in the swale could hear the clapping very clearly. As the battle had petered out, the sounds are quiet. Oh, by the way, off in the distance, a cat cried in Fredericksburg. The men are going to lie there, unable to move forward, unable to move backwards. George Pickett, another famous name from Gettysburg, later writes, the brilliant assault on Mary's Heights of their Irish Brigade was beyond description. We forgot they were fighting us, and cheer after cheer at their fearlessness went up all along their lines. Not only does William McCarter say the Confederates cheered, George Pickett leads the cheers. Cheer after cheer after cheer, running down the entire length of the Confederate line. Sometimes they don't know what they're cheering. Guys to the left are cheering, we'll cheer too. And the Irish Brigade lying in the swale or lying wounded in the fields or dying in the fields hears an enemy army first clapping, now cheering. The Southerners respect the bravery. William Nagel, 88th New York, has an entirely different view. Irish blood and Irish bones cover that terrible field today. We are slaughtered like sheep. That's not about bravery in his mind. It's not about Irish courage. It's about the fact we were led to slaughter. He will be very bitter for quite some time about his lost comrades and friends because he feels that they never ever should have been attacking that Confederate position. Never should have went in. Now, remember I mentioned that the 69th flag's missing. So when the battle's already gone, the 69th New York, by the way, loses every single officer. All 16 of them. Colonel, lieutenant colonel, major, captains, lieutenants, all of them. Every single commissioned officer in the 69th New York is shot at Fredericksburg. Every one. Again, I can't find too many Civil War regiments where every single officer is gunned down in the same battle. Doesn't happen very often. But finally, when the battle is over under a truce, the men of the 69th went looking for their flag, and they find their color sergeant laying dead against the tree with the empty flagstaff. And they start searching his body, and they find out he had ripped the flag off of the flagstaff and put it in his coat to protect it. He shot through the heart, and the 69th New York's national colors are stained with Terrell's blood, shed at Fredericksburg. Now, the Irish Brigade ends up in Fredericksburg losing 51 or so men dead, more than 100, more than 300 men seriously wounded, and dozens of men who are missing, presumed dead, not identified on the battlefield. There are prisoners of war from the Irish Brigade. You know, a lot of Civil War battles, the missing are prisoners. These guys aren't prisoners, folks. You know, these guys are dead, presumably shot to pieces, no identification. They didn't know who they were, or even if they were Irish. As mentioned, if you go to the Fredericksburg battlefield today, and you get a chance to walk the streets of Fredericksburg or walk the attack of the Irish Brigade, and it's a flat walk, folks, it's pretty easy to do. It's about 2.5 miles total, up, down, back, etc. It's not too bad at all. But what you will find is this monument to the Irish Brigade at the docks. And look what they've planted in the back. Boxwood. So that forever, the memory of the Irish Brigade at Fredericksburg is marked by this monument. Each pillar for the 5 regiments of the Irish Brigade. On that stone, the regiments and their losses to the memory of the Irish Brigade, the only brigade that I can find that the opponents clapped and cheered when the battle was over. Thank you so much, Tim. I appreciate it. Well, how many of you have been to Fredericksburg? How many are going to go back to Fredericksburg and now walk the route of the Irish Brigade? You really should. I'd wait till better weather.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I didn't point out, another thing I hate about the movies sometimes, is you see pictures of the Irish, you know, guys and generals. They're in there freezing to death. It's really cold. It's in the high 50s, folks. It's a warm breeze blowing. This is a very, very warm day in December, unusually warm. But the Irish Brigade goes down in glory, you know, through movies like Gods and Generals, things like that, that show their attacks, sometimes accurately, sometimes not so accurately, but it does give you at least a feeling for what these boys went through. Anybody here have Irish ancestors that fought in the Irish Brigade? Anybody? I've given this talk a few times. When I was in Harrisburg, I had somebody, yes, their ancestor actually did fight in the 116th Pennsylvania. So, any questions?
What percentage of the brigade was killed or wounded?
They lost about 40%. Yeah, 40%. So, and the question is in reverse. How many guys on Marie's Height went down? The Georgians lose less than 10%. So, I mean, this is a one-sided fight, obviously, which at Gettysburg, as you know, after Pickett's charge, ironically, as Pickett talks about all of his men cheering, you know, cheer after cheer, cheering, clapping the Irish Brigade, it's Pickett's men at Gettysburg, they're going to hear the reverse. The guys behind the stone wall are mocking them, not cheering them. Fredericksburg, Fredericksburg, Fredericksburg. And so the Pickett's men, I always love the irony of that. Pickett's men who cheer the Irish Brigade, you know, are mocked by soldiers, including Irishmen from Philadelphia, at the angle or near the angle. There was a question somewhere, yes, but
What happened to Mark?
what happened to Marr? Marr eventually will leave the army. He'll get desk duty, etc. Thomas Marr will then go out west after the Civil War. He will become involved in politics in the Old West, will become governor of Missouri, I think it is, or Montana, one of the two. But Tom Marr is on a steamboat plowing the Yellowstone River. And something happened, or Missouri River, I guess it was. But there's one of 3 stories. Either Thomas Marr is drunk and falls off into the river. Thomas Marr is pushed into the river as a result of gambling losses and gambling debts on the riverboat. Or Thomas Marr just simply slips and falls. His body's never found. There is no place to remember Tom Marr. His bones have never been located. Nobody knows where Tom Marr was. We don't even know the location of where the boat was when he fell off or was pushed off. It's just in the morning, he's not on it. He's not there. Sometime during the night, somewhere in the river, Tom Marr perishes. An inglorious end to one of the most famous Irishmen of the entire Civil War. Yes.
Scott, not to be deliberately naive, but I do have a general question. Can you explain how ego or valor supersedes practicality? I mean, you know, if you're on the flatland of Fredericksburg and you're looking up at what's up there, at what point do you go, this ain't gonna work?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. The same question of Pickett's men at Gettysburg. When you look at the, sturdy fence on the Emmitsburg Road, we go forward to Dunwoody. I mean, keep in mind, a lot of these folks, to your point, valor, courage. There's also the fact that the Civil War, we don't often talk about this, but the guys in your company are your neighbors. Guy next to you may be your barber. He may be your school teacher. The guy to your left could be your uncle. You're going to run or you're not going to advance. Your whole town's going to hear about it at some point that you didn't go. In fact, Civil War literature, post-war literature is littered with people who have to leave their towns and go west. Not for adventure, but because they were branded cowards and their townspeople knew they didn't go. So a lot of it's peer pressure. You're in there for your buddies. They're going, you're going, I'm going to go. Even though there's not much there. Now that's the enlisted men. The real question is, why do you order the charge in the first place? And that's the real question for Burnside, because having again walked the ground, hard to see today, but this charge was doomed from the beginning. There's no way in the world this was ever going to succeed. But Burnside, like so many Civil War officers under pressure from Washington, you got to win. You got to take the Confederates. You got to attack them. And so he was under tremendous pressure, as most officers, senior officers were during that part of the war. Anything else? Okay. Oh, yeah.
Did Burnside, did he get a demotion after the?
Yeah, did Burnside get a demotion? Burnside actually stayed with the Army for a while until he finally decides to move his army and try to flank Robert E. Lee after one of the worst winter storms you could possibly imagine. Massive rainstorms. The ground is just literally quagmire. It's called Burnside's Mud March. He wastes a lot of men, material, and equipment, and he gets summarily dismissed not long after the Mud March. Burnside, though, is, unlike a lot of other commanders, is not pilloried. He's actually given back command of the Union 9th Corps, and he will spend most of the rest of the Civil War commanding it, and quite confidently, I might add, the 9th Corps. In fact, Burnside's men are on their way to reinforce U.S. Grant when, in 1863, when word comes that the Confederates are coming to Pennsylvania. And so Burnside, Major General commanding then the 9th Corps, receives a telegram, and his men are actually in Tennessee on trains. They have to turn around, and they're going to be sent back to Ohio. They're going to be in Cincinnati on their way to Pennsylvania when the Battle of Gettysburg occurs. If the Battle of Gettysburg is a week later, the Union 9th Corps is here, back on the field. They were there with the Army of the Potomac at Fredericksburg. They're there at Antietam. They're there at Chancellorsville. They're not there at Gettysburg because, again, they're on their way to reinforce. But Burnside, spends most of the rest of the war still, performing pretty well. Unlike a lot of other guys who are like, you're done. Anything else? Okay, again, I want to thank anyone. If you're interested, I've got copies of the book. It's on sale today for $20, including sales tax. Have a great evening, folks. Thank you. So with that, thanks again. Have a great night. Thanks, Nicole.